Hello, Scuttlebutt listeners. I'm William, and we're back with another episode of World of Wargaming. Today, we have with us Doc Cummins and Joseph Miranda here to talk about their wargaming company and just wargaming in general. So, hello, gentlemen. How are you?
Good.
Very good.
All right. So, starting off with Doc, do you mind just giving me some background information, who you are and how did you become interested in wargaming and where did it take you?
Sure. I'm Doc. I think my background in wargaming started pretty early. I was playing a lot of board games in our family in the 1960s. And my next older brother brought home a war game from college, and that piqued my interest both board game wise and history wise, and kind of took off from there. In college, I ended up in clinical psychology and joined the Army through the Walter Reed internship program, and ended up as a division psychologist for the 7th Infantry during the Central American late 80s period, and followed that up with some reserve time working with stress control companies and training them how to deal with battle fatigue. After that, my interest in wargaming kind of took over. So in addition to my private practice, I started a wargame company, Decision Games, and that's where Joseph joined in. So I'll turn it over to him.
Hi, I'm Joseph Miranda, and I got interested in wargaming back when I was in high school when I went into a hobby shop, and there were these really oddly shaped boxes from some company called Avalon Hill. And I opened up one of them, and it was like there's an entire world in there. And so I got interested in wargaming. I later on joined the Army. I served as a psychological warfare officer. And after I got out, I complained to the former owner of Strategy and Tactics magazine. And I said, I don't like what your games because I don't think they really simulate very much. They said, well, if you're so smart, why don't you design one for me? So I designed a game on Afghanistan, and they eventually published it. And that began my my march to war game design. So that's where I'm at today. And I've also done contract work for various defense contractors in the distant past.
So what specifically were those wargamings not doing well that you wanted to improve upon?
Well, I thought they really weren't. Let me put it this way: I thought they were adequate for the 60s and 70s. But for the 1980s, I felt there was a wider range of things like psychological warfare. Today would be called information operations, the non-material factors. So I felt they all had to be in the game. So I put them in there. And in the Afghanistan game, I did it through markers, which represent various political and military factions. So the game is not only a military game, but it's also sort of a political game.
Excellent. So this next question is geared towards both of you. So just can you give our audience a little information about Decision Games, the types of games you make, the array of scenarios that might be, and then how Decision Games is different from either previous war games or competitive wargaming?
Sure. So we took over Strategy and Tactics magazine in 1991. So we've been at it for 30 years. And we've published over 200 issues of Strategy and Tactics in that period of time, in addition to about 200 other games along the way. What differentiates us from what came before is the Dunnigan, what I call the Dunnigan-Dupuy model of looking at war games as a quantitative study. To reduce everything to numbers and present that in a game or game simulation. I think since we took over, Joseph's focus on qualitative factors, my interest in especially how individual units perform, what defines an elite force versus a scratch force, and also the interplay of ISR in how that affects operations and how can we simulate that better in the games we produce. So where we're at with Strategy and Tactics is that it's evolved over these past 3 decades. We've had quite the focus on not just telling the story of a battle or campaign, but going a bit more in depth about how and why it occurred. So, how did that side that was inferior numerically manage to defeat the numerically superior side? What was the trick, or what was the principle that they followed that allowed them to overcome the adversity or the disadvantages they had? And so that's a lot of what the focus has been in the games. And we've also evolved the magazine. So originally, the magazine was a support product for the game. And even though the whole idea of the hybrid of the magazine with a game, which goes all the way back to 1969, Dunnigan was the creator of this first concept, is great. We saw the magazine as something that could stand alone and be a vehicle for enhancing and allowing people to improve their critical thinking and their decision making by understanding how did these military operations evolve, how did the commanders make their decisions, how do those decisions turn out, what's kind of the after action of each battle or campaign we cover, what are the lessons to be learned. And so we've kind of as more than just strategy and tactics, but decision games as a whole company, evolved to where we have multiple game lines that kind of take the military history enthusiast on a path from reading about particular battles or campaigns to looking at them more in depth to having some very introductory level games. And then actually the magazine games are kind of the third step in this progression. And then on to even more intense games and simulations that get to the place where they have multiple maps and thousands of playing pieces and are in-depth simulations for teams. So that's kind of where we stand right now. We have 5 different lines of games. We have 3 different magazines that we are operating. In addition to S&T, we do World at War magazine, which is essentially S&T for World War II. And then we also have a quarterly magazine that's also S&T that does not have a game in it, but it goes more in depth. It really spends time focused on one topic and really trying to understand the how and why of things that are not normally covered in kind of popular military history magazines. So in fact, Joseph did a wonderful in-depth survey of the Byzantium Empire here the last couple of issues, which is a topic wargamers will generally not go to. It's not their go-to kind of topic, but he did a really masterful job of kind of giving everybody the overview of how that empire evolved, what the things they were facing from period to period. And it was just really a nice summary that was not a multi-thousand page book or series that really explored that topic. And that's another way we go that necessarily does not have a game necessarily connected with it. How about yeah.
Sorry, continue.
Yeah, no, I was going to say, I think Joseph's probably got some more insight since he came onto our organization very early on while I was still wrapping up my involvement in the military. And we really kind of got involved in this whole thing very early on. And, I saw what he was doing in the late 80s with his game design work and really felt that this was the kind of person who stepped up and stood on the shoulders of what came before and said, okay, here's the path towards even better understanding.
All right, Joseph, can you cue us in on those then?
Sure. Well, one thing about strategy and tactics in World at War is allows us to publish games on a lot of topics that are often have really off-the-wall designs that you might not necessarily see in a box. And we have, for example, a game coming up on the German campaign in the Baltic region during World War I, in the last 2 years of the war, 1917 and 1918. And it's a very interesting design because you have amphibious operations, you have joint warfare, and you have a sort of a psychological warfare aspect to it. What makes the game interesting is that it's essentially you have a two-phase campaign. The first phase, the Germans in 1917 are trying to knock the Russians out of the war. But when they do that, the Bolshevik Revolution occurs, and now they've got to fight a secondary campaign against the Bolsheviks, both in the Baltic and then up in Finland. So very different situation in which the player has to use all aspects of modern warfare to gain a victory. And it's one of those campaigns that's very rarely covered, but has a lot of lessons learned for the future.
So I was going to say, isn't it interesting that we're talking about a topic where if you say World War I and amphibious operation, if you get an answer, it's going to be Gallipoli. And so here's a topic that I think even within military history enthusiasts and wargaming, that S&T regularly goes to something that you haven't heard about before. And so I'm always getting the feedback from our readership about how the S&T magazine continually goes to topics that they hadn't heard of before. And yet, this is an excellent topic for the Marine Corps in terms of here's joint operations, here's both the amphibious part as well as land parts of operations that I think would be of great interest to the Marine Corps.
You also have Zeppelins. Zeppelins are always popular.
Yeah. So you bring up a great case of like using history to help get your steps and reps in. How would you, I guess, do a complete study using your wargamings? Like, for instance, if you're trying to learn about a new topic, would you like wargame it first, read, or where does your wargames fit in the realm of using it as a teaching tool?
So I think a lot of times what happens is that it does start with reading. And we're kind of geared that way, that we anticipate that our customers will pick up our magazine off the newsstand. And our magazine is sold separately at Barnes & Noble and some other bookstores and newsstands. And so that's where we tend to pick up our customers. They get interested in that. And so they either decide from reading that lead article that goes with the game that, oh, I should pick up the game. Or they see some of the other ads that have some of the more introductory games and say, oh, this is something I'm interested in. And they'll start from there. The other place that we pick up customers is at board game conventions. So not just war game conventions, because that's really tends to be a smaller part of these larger board game conventions. So almost always I get some students, it seems, high school, college level, that come and they see what we do and they're interested in the history component. And so we get them started on something interesting to them, and they pick up that game and pursue that. So, for example, we have a little mini game on the Vikings. Well, Vikings was kind of a popular topic here in the last few years in popular TV and series, programs, movies, and so that game was popular for a while. We were selling that to people as a starting point for getting involved in wargaming, and then those people would come back and say, "Hey, do you have something in a different topic they were interested in?" So that seemed to be a good starting point.
No, I like how that works. So, how much does audience or player feedback dictate which scenarios or historical options that you go with?
Oh my gosh, that's like 90%. So from the beginning for strategy and tactics, there was a feedback loop where they would do a survey in every issue about what should our next topic be, and there would be proposals from designers, outlining what the game would be, and then the customer base or the subscriber base would vote, rate those proposals, and then the company would always favor the ones that were highly rated that the audience wanted to see. So that's been something that's carried through the entire 50-year history of S&T, and something that we pride ourselves in. It's not something that any of the other companies do, but we really strive to engage our audience and really understand what they're looking for, and it's helped shape the products that we've introduced over the past couple of decades.
Interesting. So you mentioned earlier that you have, you said 5 different lines or series of games. Do you mind just explaining what each one is and how they differentiate from each other?
Sure. So basically, working from the least complex and detailed to the most is how it works. So at the lowest end, we have what we call our mini games, and these are small Ziploc packaged games that run between about $12 and $15, which is a crazy low point for a board game at this point, price wise. And the game itself is playable on well, I've got customers that even say, I've played this on an airline folding table, because the map are basically 11 by 17, or like a 2-page spread. And there's about 40 pieces in the game, so it's not really much more than a chess set of pieces. Sometimes there's some cards, about 4 pages of rules, something you can generally read in about 10 minutes or less, and get into it. And then that whole line is divided into basically 3 groups. And within each group, there's a common set of rules. So once you've played one game, there's another 10 games that you can play with that same basic set of rules. And so that's a great introduction level for that. Then the next level up is our folio games, which happen to be about twice that size. So they're about 4 panels, or 17 by 22, about 100 pieces now. And again, there are system rules in some large groupings, so there's multiple games to play with one set of rules. And again, in both of those, there are topics that go all the way from ancient times, Caesar's War, Belisarius, all the way up to some modern topics like caisson. We had a drive on, a showdown for the Indo-Pakistani War. So there's definitely a range, and of course there's all the common World War II and Civil War and Napoleonic type topics in there, but there's some things spread out over there. So then line number 3 is our magazine games, and that's kind of the middle road. 16-page rules, about 10,000 words, something that can be read and digested in less than an hour. Now, most of the games are standalone, but some are in series, or the base rules repeat, but others are kind of standalone. Occasionally, we do games that connect, so you actually can play a single game, but over time, you will get more maps and counters such that you can play a multi-map game with the same base rules. So that's those. Line number 4 is our common box games, the kind of thing that you normally get from all the war game companies. Generally has about 2 of the full-size map sheets in it, 16 to 32-page rule booklet, usually like 2, maybe 3 counter sheets, maybe a deck of cards. And that's kind of what, when we start talking about war games, that's usually what everybody thinks of as a war game. So there's where we're at. And this is one of the reasons why it's so hard to get somebody to jump in at that level whose past play has been Risk or chess. These games are way beyond the level of Risk or chess. Risk and chess are down at that first and second level. So that's why we wanted to bring in some things that were at lower complexity levels for a good place to start. So then after line 4, when we get to line 5, we're talking about games that have multi-maps, oftentimes as many as 1,000 to 3,000 counters. They're often played by teams. These are the ones that we take to special war game conventions where they usually last a week. Many of the games that are played there, both ours and other companies, take several days to play. And there's a lot of detail. Often command structures are involved. And so we have those kind of games, or we have maybe smaller games, but they're much more intense. Maybe the rules start to become more like field manuals, and the detail is getting to that kind of level.
All right, thank you. So Joseph, I have a question for you. So you mentioned how you were instrumental in trying to improve wargaming, into more contemporary circumstances and bring in extra factors. Since you joined up with Cummins, how has y'all's wargaming evolved since then?
Well, we continue to come up with systems for showing all aspects of modern warfare, not just the kinetic, but also the non-kinetic and everything else. Now, to give you one example, we're working on a game right now called Red Dragon Green Crescent. It's actually an upgrade of an older game we did, and it covers modern and near future conflict in the Pacific and the Indian Ocean. And one of the things I added in there was a set of cards which show the effects of supply chain disruptions and other logistical factors, plus the impact on morale of loss of various critical objectives around the map. So this way, the players have to look at things from the perspective not just of moving fleets around or getting aircraft into position, but also holding critical areas that might not otherwise have strategic value, but they have immense political and economic value. So if you lose certain island chains, what happens is there's a chance there that your home front morale collapses, and there go your logistics. So it's an easy way. Cards are an easy way to integrate this all into play. You don't have to read extra rules because the rule is on the card. For some reason, players like cards. They won't read rules books, but they will read cards. You check this out. Go to a war game convention, put out a game box with some cards. Everybody starts fiddling through the cards, and it's like, oh wow, neat card. Especially have an illustration on it. So
That's pretty cool. So looking at like the current operating environment, a lot of our Marines are looking forward and planning to. How do your games incorporate, for instance, like information operations, which is like one of like the big buzzwords going around the community these days?
well, one of the things we do is we have markers representing information warfare, and you can use them for various purposes. This goes back for a while back. We did a game on the Indo-Pakistani War years and years ago, where there was an information warfare component, and you could use them for everything from doing intelligence operations to psychological warfare to demoralize the other side. So the idea by giving people pieces which represent it, you could think of it in the same terms as sort of a operational strategic asset like an airstrike, but instead the strike is obviously being conducted by information operations.
So I would make the point that Joseph has incorporated this information warfare element into games from all periods, and I think it's very helpful for wargamers to recognize that the idea of information warfare is not something new at all. So I see his stratagems and other techniques he's used in ancient warfare games that he's designed. And I think that helps everybody see that there's a lot more going on than just the chess moves on a battlefield. There's all the things that get you to that battlefield, and there's all the things that continue the campaign afterwards.
Right. We
Well,
did a series of games set in the Roman Empire, where you have basically if you win a battle you get to pick markers out of a bucket, and they give you additional bonuses down the line. So for example, you get one marker allows you to cause a city to surrender, another gives you a chance to upgrade your legions to super veteran status. So there's this whole other aspect to warfare there that you normally wouldn't see.
yeah, that's very interesting. Do you mind doing a more like, a specific deep dive into especially one of your ancient topics and how like the information is applied within there?
Well, okay, we did a game series called Trajan after the Roman emperor who went out and conquered basically Mesopotamia in the second century AD. And the way it works is the game maps themselves are based on Ptolemaic maps, so they don't look like anything you'd see from a satellite. They look at it more or less as it would have been seen from the ancient times. So you have to think in different terms. Okay. Now you don't know what the strength of enemy forces is. So if you pick an agent marker and play it, you can figure out what the enemy has, so you're not running into ambushes. Okay. And then you have another marker representing basically veteran troop upgrades. And this represents the morale impact of winning a battle. So you can then upgrade your units. Okay. So there's a reason to fight battles other than just simply taking terrain. It's also to make your army better. And then you have another which allows you to cause a city to defect to you. And this is important because otherwise you have to stop and besiege it. But what happens historically is if you won a battle, people would say, okay, these guys are the winners. We better open the gates or else. And so these markers account for all this.
Yeah,
So you have to fight in order not simply to gain a victory against an enemy army, but you're fighting the whole enemy society behind it.
interesting. So going through your specific tiers, are some geared for single player experiences and some are more geared towards multiplayer experiences?
Yes,
Yeah.
we've yeah.
Yeah, no, in each of the lines there are one-player games as well as two or more. A lot of our solo games, especially once you get off those lower introductory levels, can be played by two players against the system. So, for example, our D-Day series of invasion games, in most of the 5 games in that series, it's easy to divide the landing area into 2 zones. So like Omaha Beach, one player controls the 1st Division, one player controls the 29th Division, and they're both going to be able to play against the system and basically work. They could do a little bit of cooperation, but mostly it's how fast can they each move up the draws.
What are some, I guess, the aspects of multiplayer games when you have multiple people on each team that a lot of newer players don't consider when they start playing these types of games?
So at most of the introductory to intermediate levels, there's not a lot of that possibility for command and control levels because there's just simply not enough pieces, or they're all basically at the same level. In a lot of our operational games, the players cast in the role of a colonel or a general or general of the army, but they're controlling things down 2 levels. So an army commander might be controlling not only the corps but the individual divisions, which isn't really true in actual military ops. But in our larger games, there's enough pieces to where it really behooves the teams to have multiple players playing, because then individual players are focused. So some of our grand operational World War II games, for instance, there's one coming up on Operation Market Garden called Over the Rhine. And it would not surprise me at all to see teams with one player controlling each of the 3 airborne units that are landing, plus another player for 30th Corps, and then perhaps the same side on the Germans. And then it may be that they want to have one overall commander who's kind of coordinating things and handling the logistics and the combat support elements. So that's where it starts to get to that level where there's enough going on in the game to where it actually makes more sense to have a team with some levels to it, some tiers.
No, I'm very interested in this because I've done a few myself, and I've noticed that the whole command and control, and especially from leader going to top down, is very difficult to maintain as it is in real life. So that's really interesting. So how long do these games usually last? Like what's usually are we talking about days, weeks? How long?
Yeah, so the GOS, the over the top, from what I'm understanding from the project coordinator for that, is actually going to be one of our shorter games in this series. So I'm anticipating probably 2 days for that particular game, but it's covering a shorter time period than most of the other games. For obviously for like Atlantic Wall, we're going from June 6th all the way to August 1st. So that's a lot of time to cover for the Normandy campaign, and a lot going on there. But over the Rhine, pretty specific operation in a pretty narrow area as well. But it's not as though you can't take some of the other games for more of a classroom-oriented kind of situation, and basically group those units in their command structure. And so an individual player in a classroom, maybe they're only dealing with like 5 or 10 units. And there are some fairly straightforward ways you can set up how are the orders going to get passed down, and how much time perhaps elapses between when an order comes down from the commanding general to when does the colonel get that command from them to what do they do with their brigade.
So what are some, I guess, interesting ways you've seen the communication occur in some of the games that you've witnessed?
Joseph?
Well, you mean in multiplayer games?
Yeah.
Yes.
Yeah. Well, one thing is that you can put restrictions on how people communicate with each other. So, for example, if you're doing like a tactical level game, you could have players in different rooms, and then you pass messages. And if you want to build it into the game system, you can have headquarters, which have limited command control radii, and that restricts on what you can do. It's like one game we did was called Cold War Hot Armor, and it covers a number of scenarios, mainly in Vietnam, with involving various armored forces. And you theoretically have a pretty effective, let's say, brigade group on the map, but the way the game works is that there's a random draw of command control. And so what happens is you can only maneuver certain units on the map within command radius. So this kind of keeps things from getting out of control. You can play it actually with multiple players, each commanding, say, a different battalion, and then you have to coordinate among each other.
Yeah, and I was going to say you could even build in the different doctrines and communications abilities of two sides. So I'm working on a project right now that's 1943 World War II Eastern Front. And one of the things I'm trying to build into the model is that problem that the Germans had radios in all of their tanks, and the Russians did not. Only the company commander. So about every 5 to 10 Russian tanks actually has communication with a higher level. And so working that modeling in of how the Russians are kind of stuck with a pre-designed plan of action. And the Germans have incredible flexibility relative to that because they can keep communicating, and because they had a doctrine of take initiative at the lowest level, where the Russians, at least at
No, that's really cool how you'll go that incorporate doctrine, especially. So my next question is going to be based on that. Considering the fact that the Marine Corps' doctrine is maneuver warfare, how is there any particular games or that lean more towards it playing as maneuverist, or is it possible with every game you have?
I'm sorry, you cut out on my end.
Oh, apologize.
It's okay.
So anyway, so bringing into the issue of doctrine, which is really cool that how y'all incorporate that. I'm just wondering. So, for instance, with the Marine Corps' doctrine being maneuver warfare, how would someone achieve a maneuver's victory in those games? Is it possible in all of them, or is it some lean more towards attrition just based off the doctrine at the time? How is that incorporated?
I'm going to put Joseph on the spot for that one.
Okay. Can you hear me okay? You cut out there for a bit.
Yep, you're good to go.
Okay. Well, one game we're doing right now is called Campaign for North Africa. It's an upgrade of the old SPI game, but we decided to make it playable. So the way it works is that each player gets a set of cards. Now, the critical thing is the Allied cards are different from the Axis cards. The Axis cards emphasize more maneuver and combat. The Allied cards emphasize more logistics and administration. So the way it works is that, generally speaking, for example, if you command the 21st Panzer Division, you'll probably get more mileage out of it because you can maneuver it more and you can fight more battles. But the British, if they're maneuvering, let's say the 7th Australian Division, they may not be able to put in some fancy maneuvers, but they're more likely to be able to refit the units once they've taken losses. So you get the actual differences between the military doctrines, again, using cards. Now, this can be done in a Marine game where, okay, let's say you're emphasizing maneuver warfare. You get a set of maneuver cards. But if you're emphasizing firepower, you get a set of attrition cards. Or if you want to show the impact of logistics, you have more logistics cards, let's say more supply or transport or maintenance cards. So this way, the player can actually see it in their hand and understand what the differences are, as opposed to having a huge, big, thick rules book.
No, that's awesome. The depth you go into. That's really cool how you use cards to show that. So my next question is, especially with wargaming, it's important to keep it within the realm of the physically possible, and also within how assets were used in their time period. And I know there's a big issue in wargaming where like you can essentially quote unquote game the system or gaming the system by using an aspect that's unhistorical, but to get better results. How do you implement ways to prevent that in your wargaming?
Well, some of it gets back to the cards because it keeps within historical parameters, and some
And-
of it's victory conditions. So uh, you have to keep things sort of flowing towards what the original goals were. But we don't want to totally get rid of innovation or unconventional tactics. So that's always a possibility too.
And it's really across the entire sequence of play and other elements that come into the rules or the components, because you can demonstrate differences in doctrine by just the quantitative ratings for how fast units can move, whether they have additional move for exploitation. Do they have a doctrine of exploitation and deep penetration versus fanning out and holding ground? Who holds ground better is an interesting thing I'm dealing with again with that 1943 situation. And so the Germans understood that the Russians wanted to move forward and dig in because they needed to stop, dig in, and wait for the next order. And the Germans understood if they didn't counterattack right away, the Russians were probably going to hold whatever ground they took. So there's different ways to factor that in that. There's ways to enhance the attack strength or the defense strength under certain conditions, beyond just what terrain they're sitting on or attacking into, but how their doctrine conforms to what they'll do, with a successful attack, with an unsuccessful attack. What does their doctrine say about that? So we get back to this whole Marines against the red Op 4, and we have to start looking at, well, what is the Op 4's doctrine, and how is that going to interact with ours? Why are the Chinese spending so much time currently on developing their NCOs? They've recognized that that's a weakness in their organization. They're watching the Russians get pounded on that issue currently. And so it's clear they're spending some preparatory time trying to build up that NCO initiative. I don't think they're going to get it in the next few years because it takes generational time periods to develop that because it's going against their social cultural grain. And so it's going to take a lot of work to develop initiative within the Chinese military. Whereas when you look at the American military, we've been focusing on initiative from the beginning of our military efforts 200 years ago. So it's normal for us to understand at every level about why are we trying to take initiative? Why do we take personal responsibility for let's get the job done? Or are we having the mindset of no, we have to wait for the captain or the general to tell us what to do because we don't want to make a mistake?
No, that's incredibly awesome. I'm glad you appreciate the depth. So our audience is primary Marines of the Greater Marine Corps family. So I'm gonna give each of you a chance to argue for your case for which particular game in whichever series you wish you most highly recommend for our listeners and Marines in general.
Well, what's your favorite there, Joseph? Before I identify one at each level.
Well, at the that's what call it operational level, we did a game called Foreign Legion Solitary, Foreign Legion Paratrooper Solitary. And basically you're in command of a Foreign Legion Paratrooper regiment and you're given various missions around the world. And what you do then is you put together a task force, usually battalion to quasi-regimental size, and then you go to a specific tactical map to execute the mission. And some of them are based on real-world missions, so you may parachute into Timbuktu, or you may conduct counterinsurgency in Mogadishu, or whatever. But it gets you to thinking in the big picture terms down to little picture terms. Then down at the operation, at the tactical to operational level, the Quezon game is actually very good. It's another solitaire game. It's a mini game, and you're defending the fire base in 1968 in northern South Vietnam. And you have various cards representing your courses of action. So each one will give you a different set of circumstances. So, for example, you can pick a card that will allow you to do ground sweeps, other cards that will allow you to do a build-up, another card that will allow you to call in a relief force from the 1st Cav Division. And then the enemy is run by another set of cards, which will allow them to make various kinds of attacks or withdrawals. So it gives you a good idea of what it's like to hold a besieged fire base and to have all sorts of firepower that backs you up. So very, very, very interesting little game.
All right, so Joseph just took one of mine. Quezon, definitely the one I would pick out of the mini games for the Marines. At the folio level, there are 3 good games in that series that happen to be from the Korean War. Noctung Bulge features the Marines kind of saving the day there at the Pusan perimeter. Then we see them again at Incheon with the landings and the advance to Seoul. And then, of course, the famous Chosun River Reservoir set is in that folio group. The next one up from that, I actually going to skip over the magazines to the basic box games and hit again on the D-Day series. So 4 out of the 5 in that series are Pacific Island invasions: Tarawa, Peleliu, Iwo Jima, and Saipan. I think those are all excellent, detailed studies of the invasions at each site. Obviously, they feature Marines at every point. And your units of maneuver are basically platoons. You're generally handling 1 to 2 divisions worth of troops. It's an interesting diceless system. Everything that comes up in the game comes up as a card play in terms of fire support and advance and combat. So it's a really excellent and popular series. And let's see. At the highest level, most complex stuff. Oh gosh, I'm trying to think. Most of those are kind of at the level where the Marines are 1 unit in a much larger strategic situation. So I start thinking about some of our grand strategic things. Where we had a game called War in the Pacific that covered the entire Pacific theater at a capital ship and battalion level. So that obviously had a lot of Marine and naval action in it. But it's huge. It's definitely a multiplayer, multi-day kind of game. So some suggestions.
Did any future projects or endeavors that you wish to give our audience a peek into?
Well, we're working on Red Dragon Green Crescent, and there's a very strong amphibious element in there. And I included units for different forces that are on the drawing board or just coming online. Like you have Marine Littoral Regiments, which have sort of advanced abilities to conduct amphibious operations. And you have Expeditionary Sea Bases. You have all sorts of units you can bring in optionally to experiment how these will function within a very grand strategic situation.
So I would say another game that's coming up in the magazine is Narvik.
Yes.
Not necessarily a Marine situation, but definitely it's an interesting situation early in World War II in Norway with the Germans invading Norway and then the Allies counter-invading at the same location. So that's very unusual in terms of military history that you have an invasion and a counter-invasion on top of it. So it's an interesting study, probably one of Miranda's best little gems here in the recent past, because we have all the problems of several allied forces trying to coordinate themselves. He's got a nice mechanic where they each operate separately, and it's difficult to necessarily coordinate them, where The Germans kind of come in; they're the smaller force, but they are well coordinated from the get-go.
And one of the interesting things about the game is that a major objective are the various wireless stations around the map, because if you grab a wireless station, you can now have enhanced command control. So there's that aspect of it. Plus, upfront leadership gives you a little extra command control too.
Yeah, I was going to say another game that's coming up for next year is Operation Sea Lion, which is probably the most interesting hypothetical amphibious assault that we talk about for World War II. So that was published once in World at War. We're updating and putting it in a box with some extra features. So there again, we get to see both the Germans trying to coordinate their naval, air, and ground forces to get across the English Channel. And we get to see the Royal Navy and Air Force and troops try to repel that invasion.
Well, that's awesome. I look forward to seeing how those turn out. Is there any place where our audience can find you, like social media wise? Obviously, you have your magazines.
Right. They can always find us at decisiongames.com. We do also a article series in the Gazette that covers wargaming at a basic level. There's all kinds of information there on how to reach us. There's special offers available if they go through that particular landing page just for Marines.
All right, thank you. And then so the final question, and to make this harder, you cannot refer to a game that you produced. You've had a long day at work wargaming. You're coming home. You pour yourself a glass of bourbon. What wargaming? What specific war game are you going to play? What's your favorite war game?
Well, outside of decision games.
When do we have
your own?
When do we have time for that?
Okay. Well, the original Avalon Hill Dune. It's a multiplayer game set in the world of Frank Herbert's Dune, but very fascinating in terms of having different factions with different strategies and different capabilities. And of course, the best part is being able to ride sandworms. So I always recommend that.
It's tough for me because I'm kind of on the leading edge of having to look at things. So I'm going to go a little sideways and say, actually, my favorite thing to do is to come home and look at one of the games that's been submitted to us. And they've often been submitted to multiple companies. So there's kind of a rush to review it and make a decision about whether we're going to take it on or not. So I'm fascinated by just looking at outside designers, often first attempts at designing games and seeing what they've incorporated and what kind of innovations they've thought of that we have yet to think of.
That's a pretty unique answer. I think that's the first time we've had someone in this World of Wargaming series come up with my favorite games are the ones that haven't even been released yet. That's pretty cool that you get access to that. Well, Joseph and Doc, thank you again so much for coming on. And to all of our listeners out there, thank you for tuning into World of Wargaming. We hope to see and hear from you all again. Bye.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Scuttlebutt is a production of the Marine Corps Association. I am William Truding, but you've also heard the voices or contributions of Vic Rubel, USMC retired, Nancy Lichman, or Ty Frazier. The opinions expressed in this episode do not reflect the official stance of the Marine Corps, DoD, or Marine Corps Association.